fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
All right, you are back in the House of Mystery, and we continue our conversations with authors that have contributed to the anthology. It's a Superior Shores anthology, and it's book 4 of anthologies, and it's called Larceny Last Chances, and it's 22 stories of mystery and suspense. And today we've got Robert Weibezahl. Thanks for being here, Robert.
Thanks for having us, Alan.
And so, Robert, what about you? Now, your story is called Artifact. And so let's talk about that. What's the premise of your story?
So my story is not based on fact, but it is set on the Staten Island Ferry in New York. And it takes place one afternoon when a young man in his 30s observes a younger man, a teenager, about to throw a bag off of the edge of the ferry. And he confronts him just as a citizen and says, "You can't throw things into New York Harbor." And it turns out that what the younger person, Zach, was going to throw into the ocean was, in fact, an artifact that he has stolen from his stepfather. So conversation ensues because Sebastian certainly does not want Zach to throw anything in the harbor, but not a valuable artifact. And I won't tell you what happens because that would ruin the story.
Oh, come on. I've been waiting. So when you do a story like this, is it kind of the storyline that came first, or was it the character and then you created a story for him, Robert?
Well, this story actually has an interesting genesis because I'm also a playwright. I wrote this story originally, or a version of this story originally, as a 10-minute play. There is a theater in Staten Island, New York, that every year has a play contest for plays set on the Staten Island Ferry. And I wrote this play. It was not accepted into the festival, and it has not proven to be a particularly successful play. I send 10-minute plays out to lots of festivals, and I've had success with some of my plays, but this play just never really seemed to be appealing to these theater festivals, even though I think it's a pretty good plot. So when I saw Judy's announcement that she was doing a group of stories about larceny and last chances, which is really what this story is about, it occurred to me, wow, I already have a story like that, but it's a play. So I decided to sit down and rewrite it as a story.
So, and Robert, what was your kind of subtext or point in the story?
Well, I guess as the story unfolded, as I wrote it, it started to have a subtext that I didn't necessarily sit down and plan on, and that is the artifact in question is a Native American, an indigenous object, and neither of my characters is indigenous, although one of them is Puerto Rican, so he is a person of color. And so it opened up some interesting things about, who does anyone really own an artifact, a historical artifact? Can it be owned, even if it's very valuable? So as I say, I didn't sit down when I thought of the idea for the story with any kind of political idea that I'm going to make a statement. But some of those things come up a little bit in the story. They're not necessarily resolved, but they're just introduced as things for people to think about, and I certainly thought about them.
Right. Well, and sometimes the subtext come out of the story that you're telling, and sometimes it's not necessarily planned. It's just,
right.
Or it's organic almost. It just sort of happens, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true about all my writing. I don't really, people often ask, where do your ideas come from? I usually can't say. I mean, it's sometimes just an image, two people sitting on the bus or something like that. And I sit down and the story sort of grows out of that. I'm sure for other writers it's different. Maybe things come fully formed into their heads, but mine just sort of grow as I'm writing.
Do you also hear your characters, or is there some other way that you create your dialogue?
Yeah, I think I hear them. I don't literally speak out loud as I sit at the computer, but I speak out loud in my head, if that makes sense. I think I've always been, as a writer, one of my strengths has always been dialogue and character, whereas perhaps one of my weaknesses has been plot. So that might be why I've turned most of my attention to playwriting. Not that plays don't have plots, but character and dialogue is so important. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about writing. When you're describing something, you want to describe it well, and you don't want to use too many words. So, most writing is editing. So in finding those perfect words to describe the way a character is leaning over is really, when you find it, it's just such a great feeling as a writer that you just zeroed in on exactly the right description.
And it's going to be a lot tougher. Like with doing it in a short story, I always wonder, because I've never done a short story myself. So when you do a full novel or book, you have a lot of room to, describe the history and the characters and the life and the reason why they do things that they do. It's easier to describe that and get the reader to know that. But in a short story, you've got a lot less room to do that. So you've got to choose your words wisely. Do you have a method, Robert, yourself?
Well, I don't write that many short stories. This was sort of my 8th or 9th short story over many years. I think I've gotten better at it over time in being concise and learning how to convey certain things about characters without going into too much detail. I agree with you. I've written 2 mystery novels, and it was a while ago, but you have so much more room. It's so expansive. It doesn't matter if your mind wanders off for a page and you have your character just sort of ruminating on something from the past. But obviously you can't do that in a short story. So it's really a shorthand, and it's really something you have to just learn by doing.
Do you find that your characters, as you're writing, whether you're writing a short story or a play, do you find your characters surprise you as you go along? Do they ever take the story right off the rails and make it difficult to go in the direction that you'd like to go, or are you more in control?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with a short story, they don't take me too much by surprise, because I think I generally know how the story is going to end, at least basically how it's going to end. So if they go too far off the rails, or I would let them go too far off the rails, I would never be able to get back. But yeah, I think it can happen. And certainly when I was writing novels, or when I write a full-length play, which is sort of the equivalent of writing a novel, a character will walk in the room and say something that I don't know why he or she is saying that. And suddenly I think, yeah, but that character would say that. That's exactly what this character would say. And it doesn't even always change the plot. It might just change the relationship of that character to another character, which I guess does in some ways change the plot. But it's a really kind of fun process when that happens.
Violence and the hard scenes, or the things like that, when we talk about that. So, Robert, do you think about how you write your bad character and the evil, and how you describe things in your book?
Yeah, my stories and books don't tend to be particularly violent. I mean, obviously there are murders, there's mysteries, there's deaths, but, I don't tend to go into the really gruesome details. That's not really the genre I fall into. But as far as characters, I mean, I absolutely love writing bad characters, and I would imagine Gina does too. I think most writers do. I wrote a story last year or so about it was all inside a character's head that was just brooding about his noisy neighbors, and it was taking him back to memories of things that happened at college that were noisy, and this resentment builds up, and he ends up killing his neighbors, to be blunt. And I just loved getting inside the head of this sort of reprehensible man who didn't see himself that way at all. He thought he was a victim, that he was being picked, that his neighbors were making noise. Poor, pitiful me. So I guess what I'm saying is I like digging into the dark psychology of characters. The visual violence, there's not that much of it in my work.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you just loved getting into killing the neighbors.
Well, yes, but I mean, even when I killed the neighbors, or when he killed the neighbors, it wasn't, I didn't have bodies torn open and the innards described, as some writers are very good at that kind of, those kind of effects, but mine is more of a psychological thing.
You have social media, website, all that. How do you like readers to follow you?
Yeah, I'm very active also on Facebook, and I have a separate dedicated Facebook page, which is Robert Weibezahl Writer. as opposed to my private page. And I probably update that, not every day, but many times a week with what's going on as far as my writing, other things related to writing. I'm on Instagram, but I don't really know how to use it very well, so I don't really use it too often. And I have a website too, which is robertweibezahl.wordpress.com. And that's more of a place to go for background information. I don't update it as often as I do the Facebook page, obviously.
Well, fantastic. Of course, now we're going to have the book up on our page, and we appreciate you being here. So thanks very much.
Thank you for having us, Alan.
Oh, appreciate it. And take care.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.